Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. On behalf of Wisconsin People and Ideas Magazine, the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters, and the Madison Public Library Foundation, I'm honored to welcome you to the 2020 Wisconsin Book Festival. Whether this is your first festival or you're a longtime participant, I'm glad you're here with us tonight. I'm Jason A. Smith, editor of Wisconsin People and Ideas Magazine. This thing. It's the quarterly magazine of the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters. Since 1954, the Academy has been making a magazine for people who are curious about our world and proud of Wisconsin ideas. Wisconsin People and Ideas features thoughtful stories about our people and culture, original creative writing and artwork, and informative articles about Wisconsin innovation. We also provide opportunity and encouragement for Wisconsin writers through our annual literary contests, the winners of which you'll hear from tonight. Now, one of my favorite things to do with the magazine is to partner with the Wisconsin Book Festival for these annual poetry and fiction contests. Open to all Wisconsin residents and students age 18 and older, these contests offer prizes of up to $500, publication in Wisconsin People and Ideas magazine, a one-week residency at the lovely Shake Rag Alley Center for the Arts in Mineral Point, and a reading at the Wisconsin Book Festival in Madison. Our next contest submission window opens this coming January 15th, and we accept submissions online and via USPS until March 15th. These contests are just one of the ways in which the Academy supports Wisconsin writers, and that's why we're here tonight, to support our writers and to hear some incredible fiction and poetry from our 2020 contest winners. Of course, we wouldn't be able to hold a contest of this magnitude across the state to showcase Wisconsin's excellent writers without our contest supporters. And I'd again like to thank Shake Rag Alley Center for the Arts for providing each first place winner with a one-week writer's residence on their lovely Mineral Point campus. We're also grateful to Wisconsin Public Radio for their promotional support and our contest judges, poet and former Madison Poet Laureate Oscar Mireles and author Chloe Benjamin, who judged a fiction contest, as well as our preliminary judges, Alex Paniagua, Jody Vandermolen, and CX Dillhunt. They all deserve appreciation for their thoughtful consideration of every single story and poem that passed before them. Now, this reading tonight wouldn't even exist without the efforts of Madison Public Library and the Madison Public Library Foundation. I want to thank the dedicated people who helped to make the Wisconsin Book Festival happen, especially director Connor Moran. All right, so on to our readings. We're going to begin with Dominic Holt. Dom won third place this year for his poem Liquirizia. Dominic is a poet and macro-social worker who lives in Monona, not too far from my house, actually. He holds an MFA in creative writing and a master's of social work from the University of Michigan and a BS in astrophysics from Indiana University. Dominic's work has appeared in Wisconsin People and Ideas a couple of times. Hummingbird, the magazine of the short poem, Stoneboat Literary Journal, Poetry Quarterly, and other venues. I'm going to ask Dom to join me now. Let's give him a welcome, a remote welcome, shall we?
Hi there, and thank you, Jason. My neighbor, apparently. So I'm Dominic Holt, and I'm very honored to be here with you all today and to participate in this great event. In these times, I think it's very important to lift up Black voices. And so the first poem that I'm going to read is by a Black poet, Keith Wilson. His poem is called Ode to the Police. May your feet and hands be soft. May the pads of your fingers be like aloe vera Kleenex, and your chest fill the land with the strong and dependable comfort of medicated balm. May your hair glitter like the targets of stars, and your sirens resound like children for their fathers. May we see you coming a mile away. May you taste the common taste of milk the way we taste the common taste of milk, and your heart become extreme, large as a softball at the zipper of the ribs, and therefore let it be enough. Let it be so big you cannot breathe, for all your other feeling. Again, that's Ode to the Police by Keith S. Wilson. And now to my own poems. This one's titled, At the Lynching Museum, Brian Stevenson Says, some sheriffs stood guard, days at a time, so all could see the handiwork of the rope, how blood blackens dirt, rouges concrete, the gouged neck swollen, lips, eyes, humming green, iridescent flies, scrotum open, dangling the weight, once prayed, hoped, cradled children. The sworn officer pitches camp, far from the stench, smokes his pipe, leafs the Bible, sips fresh brewed coffee from Miss Elizabeth down the way. And that's referring to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. This next poem is titled Reparations. The auction block still rides on the black backs of ghosts, hurling themselves town to town on furious horses, dawn, noon, and night. These emaciated shadows sawing every gnarled branch, every chiseled rafter that held them, each skeleton hand that shackled, that swung, rifles, whips, batons, dynamite and gasoline into trailways, buses, churches, homes. Now videophone, the best chance. Still Eric Garner and George Floyd can't breathe. And everything I've ever seen here was built first on black, brown, yellow skins, and blood, always blood, and bones as any other. I understand there's an election coming up. This one is called Signs Nailed to the Mailbox on Wenaqua Road. They won't say empire nailed to the mailbox. They won't say perpetual war nailed to the mailbox. They won't say black babies twice as likely nailed to the mailbox. They won't say welfare for corporations nailed to the mailbox. Black new moms 4 times as likely nailed to the mailbox. Institutional racism plus sexism equals early black death nailed to the mailbox. Trickle down economics plus 3 jobs equals no living at all nailed to the mailbox. Hui pipe, cradle to prison to grave nailed to the mailbox. Your sapphire preferred city card bankrolls private prisons nailed to the mailbox. In case of emergencies of white fragility, close eyes for comfort nailed to the mailbox. They will say, for your own damn good, nailed to the mailbox. They will say, the 1%, sticky and sweet, nailed to the mailbox. They will say, you're not from here, nailed to the mailbox. What if your family was rotting in detention camps in the desert, nailed to the mailbox. Drinking from the toilet, your cell, standing room only, nailed to the mailbox. What if your kids were in cages, nailed to the mailbox? Quote, Vladimir buddy, don't meddle, unquote, again, wink, wink, nailed to the mailbox. Smash the patriarchy, nailed to the mailbox. The American dream. Okay, for a lighter note, this one's called Route 38, Arbor Hills. My mother always said, our people were poor enough, south enough in Italy's boot, and off the toe in Sicily, to slave under the Romans, rebel with Spartacus, wishful. No doubt I've been lucky, 3 degrees from limestone towers, beyond what many on this route could afford. Spain also ruled swaths of Italy after Rome burned. Here, We share a bus to work, to home. This next poem is about my Italian grandfather, Domenico, whose self-portrait is right behind me. When the Great War. As my mother tells it, when the Great War came, my great-grandmother, Guarnaschella, lied. Dates are relative. Domenico wouldn't be 16, wouldn't be conscripted, didn't matter. Ran away with his cousin to the front at 14, earned him a bayonet gash he would boast a lifetime later. No one else in his unit survived. Once I touched that smooth valley in his right shin, looking, wondering, all the while what he could not tell us. More than once, from Venice to Rome, a passerby or fellow treno rider speaks to me as if I am just another Italian man, except for my clothes, my luggage. If I keep to the pleasantries, I am you, nonno. I am you, Nicola Domenico. And for a moment, I am alive, feel home again, the half of me, Neapolitan peasant, Sicilian unknown. Venezia, which is Venice in Italian. Seagulls shear glass from sky and lagoon, boomerang wings, cries tickling 1,000 necks of tourists on Rialto Bridge and in Vaporetti down Grand Canal. Few candeliers still bellow songs their fathers taught them. And this is the third place poem. Jason referenced Liquirizia. Tell me, grandfather, did you ever try to scrub out your dark Mediterranean skin, your camel's original Napolitano tongue at home, at night, while your family slept? Did you spiral and spiral about tomorrow like I do? You tailoring for Louisville's white Southerners, and I, white, trying to unwind the fire white devils who snake into our brains from the time we can see, we can hear, we can taste the licorice spice of privilege and have no idea. Liquirizia means licorice. This one's called Carmen Gia, like the car. You revved that sewing machine like you revved your yellow jacket Carmen Gia into your 80s, to the chagrin of many a mailbox and jogger on Poppy Way Road. Uncle John hid your keys and you found them every time. Then he stole your battery and you kept calling Sears Roadside Service and Repair. Those tow truck drivers chewing skull, smirking in your driveway. You got to be kidding, old man, again? The stories you must have peddled, the cash you must have slipped to keep them coming back. To Jimmy, one more lock, lift one more battery into that flat 4. Pistons churning, charging you up the Kentucky Bourbon Hills. As when you were a young man, racing your paisans up the lava drifts of Pompeii for a view and a dig for Roman pots, brooches, or olive oil carafes, any jewel old enough, intact enough to pawn or trade for another night on the town. Getting close to the end of my poems. This one is for my late father. It's called My Father and the Sea. And it refers to a different grandfather, not this one. My father and the sea, the wind pulls me under the sun, leaving me to this sea, hull speeds, and my father, his beard bristles in the mist of surf and sail as he rudders his boat through the bay of Punta Gorta, and I cling one hand to the lifelines and the other to the mast so it will not swing, smacking us unconscious, hurling us over the edge. His adventures create obstacles he must overcome, like the seam he splits in the tide, with his boat turning over the waves like a plow. In this field of salt, he sows old memories of him and his father, and what happiness may have looked like on the days of his father's face. This is also in the newest edition of Wisconsin People and Ideas as a bonus poem. It's called When the Wall Clouds Come. We were married in the interludes of thunderstorms. June, blacktop hot. Those rose bushes arced in the driving sun. I was steaming in my Michael Kors black suit that, days later, I would wear to my father's funeral. Waiting for the sun, we crossed our wires, messengers to and from her dressing room, a classroom in the MSU Rose Garden Visitor Center, go or no go, as Doppler radar flickered red rotating vectors. I jarred the crowd, holy, finally, here she comes, when Heather and entourage marched out to the courtyard. The torrents and lightning lulled, broke the 95-degree heat and the electricity to Aunt Dorothy's keyboard and my brother-in-law's microphone. Under an umbrella my brother held, the officiant clenched purse to tummy, visibly pissed she was amid drizzle. Hit a car on the way in, her husband said, when I called because she was late. I was wet to the boxers. Heather blushed pink impatience, rugoso rose with so many eyes on her. Her fingers jittery as sleet. We shouted our vows, paper dimpled with drops. She was sweating too in her ivory Victorian gown, the slopes of her satin shawl smooth as icing on our vanilla raspberry cake inside. No veil, no train. She wanted us to wait until anyone could marry. Like high school sweethearts, Josh and Scott, standing paces apart in the groomsmen line, hands to themselves as if by instinct. Or my jazz drumming cousin Dennis and his partner Mark, a middle school principal, sitting without touching, while other couples held each other close. Felt like hail piercing my neck to see this. I've wished us to marry, had a hunch. Like birds, day or night, sense the magnetic field of the world and know the way home when the wall clouds come. And then my last poem is called Obad. Tree trunks groan, bend and twist under currents. The world spins, unstoppable clock, until sun or space rock, slingshot and cosmic, cracks the gear and axis of this, our nature and machine. The night, our cobalt dome, pierced with stellar particle waves. Their world of fire, strand nuclear, their worlds of fire, strand nuclear through the empty, for my eyes to catch, to swallow. These threads wind through to bait and lure, to raise the dead and ghost with breath. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you, Dominic. That was great. I've seen a lot of those signs in Monona tacked to the mailboxes that Dominic referenced, and one of them I drive by every day is Smash the Patriarchy. I like seeing that every day. Our next reader this evening is Kathryn Gahl. Kathryn's an Appleton-based writer who's been racking up the awards lately, in addition to taking second place in our contest for her poem Sister, which she'll read tonight. Kathryn took first place in both the fiction and poetry categories of the Hal Prize, which is held every year by Peninsula Pulse. It's a great contest. They pull in some wonderful writers, and this year Kathryn won in 2 categories. She's won or placed in our fiction and poetry contests over the years. I'm privileged enough to see Kathryn all the time since I've been doing this for about the past 10 or 11 years. And she just had a poetic memoir that she published called The Velocity of Love. So I'm excited to check that out too. It just came out by Water's Edge Press. So I'm going to welcome Kathryn Gahl.
Jason, thank you. And thank you to the Academy. It's a weird world now, and I don't know who's out there, but I'm glad that you showed up, and I hope you have a good time. I'm going to open with the second place poem, which is why I'm here, and it's called Sister. It's from my sister, Marianne, and I know she's out there. Sister. My sister doesn't do sad. She tried it on a few times, different styles, different sizes. Nothing quite fit, either too loud or too dark, too tight or too baggy, she'd say. But I think it was the silence of sadness she couldn't size up. See, she's a musician, and she hears B major, the happiest of notes in her rose garden, and she weeded out E flat minor, the saddest, from between the beans because she lives in the key of wonder. When I was little, I watched her practice piano on the windowsill before we got the upright, and now her fingers glide on the bass clarinet, and she loves parades and dogs and actors on stage. She bakes toffee bars, chimes in at book club, and will call you on the phone, checking in with perfect timing. And then, when it gets too quiet, she will sit at her kitchen table and handwrite a letter to a prisoner. So when it is opened, her cursive flows like a cello, deep and smooth, making a little cell swell. Words rise from the page like high notes of a flute. Measure by measure, my sister's drum roll of love, piercing the silence there. The next 2 poems I thought I would share are from my latest release, The Velocity of Love. Allow me. It's a beautiful book. Well, I think, but I'm biased. This poem, the entire book is devoted to my grandson. And this one is titled, What I Know and What I Want to Know. That you are here, that it is now, that you will outlive me, that you will carry on, that you will cry on and be okay when I am gone, that you will remember everything I taught you, the things we talked about and the things we never got around to, which you must imagine when the neck of time snaps and paralyzes me like your great-grandmother. And always we shall remember when you learned to walk, how you lifted your butt, the foot, the heel, and felt the shift to the other hip, the possibility that you inherited my walk. This is also from The Velocity of Love, and it's titled, This, I Believe, is What You Are Trying to Tell Me. Get a view, preferably a long one. Short can work too. Roar, growl if need be. Judge no one. Heat up, cool down. Light a candle. Listen to the body. Favor circles over straight lines. Wash your hands. Check your pulse. And then thank it. Paddle through gossip. Make big splashes. Skip often. Anoint your feet. Mind the stars. Mend torn thoughts. Avoid compartments. Be wrong. Come closer. Seek solitude. Crack your back. Expect the unknown. Love with ease. Laugh a lot. Do not lean. Be beautiful. Be fierce. Be anything but mad. I was a nurse for many years, and I was always intrigued by the body and all its parts. It's a complicated machine we live inside, and we sometimes forget it. This is a poem that I hope will get under your skin. It's called The Surgeon. Agonal. Remember this word. Remember steam rising from the incision, the maze of nerves interrupted when the surgeon, he takes blade number 10 and slices through a millimeter of skin, black, white, red, yellow. When the surgeon, she, calls for retractors to hold open colors woven by geography, by a reaction to sunlight, black, white, red, yellow. The molecules of melanin now rimming a gaping hole of decision. As the surgeon peers into a brick red pool of hurt, suction please. Fist of cardiac muscle, stomach wrenching with fear, liver a quiver from fat pitched at it, and beseeching the skilled hands of a surgeon, mask beneath the eyes, windows of the soul. What does he, she see in 3D, HD? Agonal. Remember this word, this agony, inside, black, white, red, yellow, yelling for scopes, probes, scans, robotic arms, stitchery, after the vertebral bones lining the backside like building blocks abruptly fall down, tripped, slipped, punched, hit, kicked, shot full of lies, before the body is rescued by EMTs and delivered post-haste to the nurses who prepare it, wheel it to the surgeon who cuts and peels, full-bloodedness and its aftermath, the red string of fate in China and Japan, gypsies and jealousies, retinal detachments blind as justice, and an aneurysm cracking like a glacier trying to hold on. Agonal. Remember this word. When the pulse stops, when air heaves from the lung, when silence descends, and one recalls the old adage, do not operate on the day of death, on the day when the surgeon sees God. This is the other poem that is in the current Wisconsin People and Ideas, along with Sister, and it's called Angel of Simplicity. I'm showing my age, which is okay, it's a good thing, about learning to sew. And for those of you who are seamstresses and tailors, you will know paper napkin, paper that was what we cut out, Simplicity Patterns, Butterick, they're all different brands. So this one is called Angel of Simplicity. Simplicity was the pattern maker. Onion skin we would cut for bodice, skirt, and waistband. The sleeve of the future, my mother believed, enrolling me and my sisters in the Cleveland Mary Masters 4-H Club, where we learned to sew flat fell seams, gather skirts, line plackets, design a time to do something. Did I know what it was? Why did it take so long to find it? Was I asking the wrong question, or was it simply a derivative of simplicity? How I feared to ask that, or more, since my mother would harumph past the ironing board on her way to the washing machine and call me argumentative while I begged her to stop working, sit down, talk with me, or at least buy me a dictionary so I could look up argumentative. These last two poems are from a new collection that will be coming out from Cornerstone Press in 2022. It's called Messengers of the Gods, New and Selected Poems. Martha Graham called dancers messengers of the gods. And so this entire book is about my great passion, dancing. When the kissing. When the kissing comes at dawn of day, mid-morning, past high noon, there is still time all afternoon to drink the sun, braid the wind, and when night arrives, find the gesture of your hand and hold it, what the dance teacher calls frame, which brings us back to kissing, a union of parts to shape the craving. And lastly, what is the greatest desire? What is the greatest desire? To dance, of course. Dance is a love language, and language is a love. Hear how they move and groove, bop to the bass. See them lock in rhythm, twinkle and drizzle with flicks and turns, waltzing on stage and page. The language of dance, the dance of language. So what are you waiting for? Speak to me. Thank you, Wisconsin Academy. Thank you, all the Wisconsinites and international people who are sharing an unusual time in history. I love you.
Thanks, Kathryn. We'll keep an eye out for your new collection from Cornerstone Press in case you haven't heard of Cornerstone. It's a lovely press up in Stevens Point. They're putting out a bunch of titles, maybe I think 4 or 5 titles a year now, generally Wisconsin authors or authors from the Midwest, fiction, poetry, essays. Check them out. And now we are on to our 2020 Poetry Contest champion, Susan Martel Hebner, whose poem 1967 was selected as the best by contest judge Oscar Mireles from more than 600 submissions across the state. It's a lot of poems. Susan's poetry has appeared in several formats, many times in different places, most recently including the anthology Leaves of Peace, published by the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets, as well as in her chapbook titled Reality Changes with the Willy-Nilly Wind. Say that 3 times fast. Susan also writes essays, and her Battle at the Lot Line is an essay that appears in a new anthology designed specifically to fight polarization in America right now, which is a really cool idea. I think the anthology is called Recreating Our Common Chord. So check that out if you get a chance. Coming to us live from Mukwonago, Wisconsin is the first place winner, Susan Martel Hebner.
Thank you, Jason. Boy, carrying first prize is sort of heavy on my shoulders right now with listening to Kathryn and listening to Dominic. I'm very honored to be among these poets. I would like to start actually by not reading something that I wrote, but it's from this book called Early Music by an Irish poet. His name, I'm going to probably slaughter this, Michael O'Sullivan. The book is by Many Rivers Press. And I read this poem a couple days ago. And yes, as Dominic said, there's an election coming. And as Kathryn said, the whole world is sharing in this unusual, intense time. And when I read this poem, there was a metaphor I wish that I had written. And I want to share it with you, just you might find it appropriate too. You thought you knew what you wanted and encouraged the best in the folly. Then that fell away, leaving you standing, knees shaking, close to buckling, crying out before the ends of sentences. Your compass will still. It is shuddering to its pinpoint. So as we shudder to our pinpoint, I'll begin by reading my poem, 1967, that was awarded first place in this incredible contest. 1967. It was that summer, 19 years old. I lived alone, fevered with independence, efficiency apartment on Summit Avenue, scratchy cushions, pull-out couch, Goodwill dishes. My boyfriend and I drank liquor from jelly glasses, pounded the thin mattress even flatter, ignored the metal frame bruising our backs. It was that summer, freedom meant working. Wisconsin Bell Telephone Company, long distance operator, 26th and Highland, on the roof, men with rifles, protecting the communications center, claimed danger of rioting, a takeover. IDs required in the lobby, no one spoke on the elevators. The cafeteria on break, cut corn and meatloaf slabs, steaming on shiny white plates. I squirted ketchup. A coworker slapped spoonful of mayonnaise. When I asked, she said, lots of us use mayo. And us meant Black people. And even though she always carried a paperback, just like me, us also meant different, foreign. It was that summer when the three men who rented an apartment above mine thundered down the stairs, heavy boots, helmets, camouflage, rifles combat ready, National Guard, my neighbors. Maybe the same men who jumped into the road, guns shouldered at Reservoir Park, a checkpoint for entering or leaving the city, to discourage another claim, marauding bands of armed men. It was that summer when throwing rocks and curses was 30 seconds on the 6 o'clock news, and sunlight burned the asphalt on the 16th Street Viaduct. A lot of my work in the last couple of years has been haunted by the situation of children and families at our borders. I'm sure you have felt the same way. The next poem I'm going to read to you comes with an epigraph. Joy Harjo's poem, It's Raining in Honolulu. And the line from her poem is, and the rain songs of all the flowering ones who have called for the rain. Songs of children. Does heaven hear the song the children sing? The one that is their fear, their despair? Is there a song with notes that rise to angels' ears, a song that is heard before the notes fade, before the synapses meant for joy grow silent? Flowers call for the rain, and the rain answers. Who answers the children who call? Now, when something is haunting you, it has a way of showing up in a lot of the way you think and feel and connecting the dots. And I'm going to read the next poem, and it's actually about a whale, whales. There's a pod of orcas that live in the waters between Port Angeles, Washington, and Vancouver. And the pod is assigned the letter J by scientists who study the pod of orcas. And, you know, scientists want to assign a non-subject, give no names, give a non-subjective, more objective term to the subject of their study. So this is the J pod, and they assign numbers to the different whales also, but the people who live in the areas give them names. You might be familiar with this. Remembering J35 and the asylum seekers. July 2018. In the Salish Sea, an orca named Taliqua mourns her dead calf. For 17 days and 1,000 miles, she nudges her daughter's corpse to the water's surface, refusing to let her go. Taliqua's grief tour imprints her name across borderless waters upon our hearts. August 2018. In McAllen, Texas, parents sit childless in detention, told their children were taken to be bathed. This is a lie. The children never return. The parents hold papers they cannot read. There are numbers, 100 shelters, 17 states. The children are somewhere. We don't know their names. And of course, we may never. We do know some of the names of some of the children who have crossed our consciousness during these times of kidnapping in our nation. And this next poem is written in honor of one of those children. Instead of a bicycle at Christmas. At 8 years old, with eyes the color of dark chocolate and a smile wide with wishes, Felipe takes his father's hand and they begin the journey. Felipe travels holding two hopes. One, to earn money for his mother. He wants her to have new clothes. And the biggest hope, a bouncing sky-high chance to get a bicycle for himself. 8 years old and now a veteran traveler, Felipe arrives at the El Paso border. Guatemala is far away, but his dreams still chatter within his little boy mind during the days spent with his father inside the fencing, waiting at El Paso del Norte International Bridge. Everyone sleeping on bare dirt, sleeping so many families on bare dirt. He begins to feel hot and his eyes grow glassy. They take him to Alamogordo's Border Patrol Station, then to Gerald Champion Regional Medical Center. It is 1 a.m. It is Christmas Eve, but there are no bicycles. Felipe tells his father he will not get better. He tells his father not to be sad. Felipe Alonso Gomez gently parks his bicycle inside his 8-year-old heart and closes his chocolate brown eyes. So many children. Now, transparency. Aren't we tired of hearing that? To be transparent, but okay. I read the obituaries. Maybe some of you do too. And when I read them, my husband teases me and he says, "Did you find your name in there? And I'll say, well, no. And he said, well, then we're still okay. The title of this poem: I read the obits and consider I'm still here. Yesterday, I didn't die by a tree falling on me. Yesterday, I didn't die when crossing the street, but not at a crosswalk. Yesterday, I didn't die by a slip of the knife when splitting the acorn squash. Yesterday, I didn't die cleaning the bird bath and pulling weeds in the heat and humidity. Nor did I die while wiping my granddaughter's fingers, sticky with cupcake frosting. Today, I continue to pray for the children sleeping in cages under mylar covers, for the parents who cannot find rest without them, for the sorrows of this world, because today I didn't die. It reminds me, when I read it, of Jane Hirschfield. You might be familiar with the poem, The Weighing. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. I want to finish with the poem that was the bonus poem that was printed in the magazine. And forgive my pronunciation. Muñecas Quitapeñas. Guatemalan worry dolls. This is a little picture of my Guatemalan worry doll. And the name of the poem, Bedtime Quitapeñas. It's a good poem for when your brain won't be quiet at night, when you go to bed, if you're like many people right now, especially, when all you hear in your head is Wolf Blitzer's voice and he won't shut up. When your thoughts twist in swirls and spirals, when your mind drills down into grainy quicksand, and your fears range reckless on the backs of ponies, invite them all to rest beside a whispering fur-lined pool. Allow your soul to fly a kite against the blue dark sky. For under your pillow, a worry doll will grab its tail and string you along toward the sleepy stars. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Susan. I wish I could come up with a remedy for having the situation room in your head all the time. But I think poetry is probably a good way to silence all of our inner wolf blitzers. Thanks again, Susan. And thanks to all of our poetry readers tonight, all of our winners, such a great crew. And we're really lucky to have them. So now we move on to our fiction readers. Beginning with our 2020 contest third place winner story called Without Provisions. Now the story is written by a writer named Barbara Kriegsmann, and she's a Washington Island resident. Barbara couldn't be with us tonight, so her friend Mari Anderson is going to read the story for Barbara, or at least part of the story. And Mari's a writer too, and a graphic designer and a yoga teacher who's known for an award-winning travel memoir called Plunge, Midlife with Snorkel. You guess what that's about. And Mari's also known for swimming across the 4-mile passage between Door County and Washington Island, known as Death's Door. So Mari's writer, daredevil. We're lucky to have her here tonight reading Barbara's story. Let's welcome Mari, okay?
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate Barb trusting me with her story. So thank you, Barbara. She's a wonderful writer, as you're about to find out. I won't be able to get through the whole story, but we agreed on a place to stop. So hopefully the rest of it will be available through the Academy at some point, which I'm sure Jason will tell you about. This is Without Provisions by Barbara Kriegsmann. Eva would tell her father about the proposal herself, for her mother had kielbasi to make for the Pope and could think of nothing else, the request coming as it did from the cardinal and his courier coming to pick up the sausage by evening. And then, thought Eva, as she sniffed the air, it's here, false spring, that inevitable day in February when a scented breeze teased the lakeshore, scarves were unwound, overcoats unbuttoned, and waves of thaw spread west across the city. It seemed to her as she crossed Damon Avenue, swinging her canvas book bag, that no other place on earth could enjoy such brilliance, that the melt of harsh winter made the warmth penetrating, made jewels of every stick and stone, diamonds hung from the bare elms along the parkway, holly leaves sprung like shiny emeralds beneath the retreating snow. Weekday wash was pinned to backyard lines, bright flags of relief. They decorated their boxy bungalows. The windows of the Kirshner's three-flat were thrown open so wide passersby could hear the hissing rhythm of water through the pipes of their radiators. Eva paused before the door to the butcher shop under the sign Teddy's Provisions, feeling as she did that she was on the brink of losing something. She imagined the tinkling silver of the bell she would hear at its opening. Hugo Huck, her father's apprentice, hurried from the shop at that moment, exciting the bell. There it was, that clear and fluty sound. Hugo's chapped hands were full of paint cans, but he managed to hold the door for her, using his work boot as a stop. 3 horsehair brushes were tucked in his apron, their speckled handles lined up beneath the narrow linen ties, neatly like soldiers. Even the trash cans will get a coating for the Holy Father, Hugo mumbled hastily. He was surprised to see her midweek, home during her first year at the Jesuit University 90 miles north of Chicago. She looked different since her last visit. It must be the long braid that had given way to a sleek bob that let her mahogany hair shine red in the sun. But she was still a slight girl who barely reached his breastbone. Just weeks ago, Eva had delivered boxes of Christmas kolaches, fat cookie pillows crowned with dollops of fruit, half with prune paste, half with apricot jam, dusted neatly with powdery sugar, presents for him and the clerks. The paper pleated cups looked like little red and green skirts placed upside down to hold their prizes. He allowed himself one as a reward on each of the 12 days of Christmas until, on the Feast of the Three Kings, the lonely last one tasted only of the tin. He looked relieved when Eva smiled and the familiar grin peeked slowly through her grown-up face, the grin that dimpled her cheeks and turned up her mouth in a lopsided way that made her seem shy. Then her blue eyes danced, and he realized how good it was to see those dimples and dancing eyes, how nice it was to see her. She was greeting him, but he hardly heard her, for he felt uneasy, recognizing as he did his own pleasure at her visit. Hugo stared down at her shoes, and it was then he noticed her tasseled loafers, always buffed to a fine cordovan shine, were rimmed this day with gray waves from the salty slush. Somehow this made him more flustered, and losing his grip on the cans, they clanged clumsily against each other. Eva was used to bashful Hugo. To spare him the effort of conversation, she quickly stepped into the gleam of stainless steel and glass that was her father's shop. The thick, sloping panes of the display cases reflected fluorescent light. For a moment, the brightness obscured her focus. Then she saw, off to the side of the shop, the distinctive carmine color of organ meats, kidneys, livers, and hearts cradled in trays. Was there anything in the world so deeply red? She remembered once being frightened by this sight, by its stinging smell, and huddling behind her father, clutching the hem of his starched jacket. Her father's bottomless laugh, his bellow, "You don't know what you're missing, rabbit, but that's all right. There'll be plenty more for me and my neighbors." This day, there was a wall of women, heads covered with babushkas, purses slung from the crooks of their arms and held tightly against their hips, clucking at the front counter. These matrons were like an order of nuns in their own strict habits, which kept any but the most observant from distinguishing them one from another. They seemed all to be of the same middle age, with broad foreheads framed by the small bands of colorless hair left uncovered by the riotous silk of chiffon scarves. For the first time, Eva was conscious of how different they looked compared to the women outside this small neighborhood. She felt a vague discomfort standing among these Polish women, the ones she had seen hurrying to the shops or to the church every day of her childhood. The ones who bought liver for their dumplings in this shop every week, the ones who wore house dresses just like her mother's. Then one of them stepped back from the pork section, and Eva could see thick, pearly chops laid out like brickwork, each one framed with an inch of ivory fat. But she still couldn't see her father. She felt a familiar queasiness about the back room full of blades and mallets, where large cleavers were mounted on the wall after Hugo's meticulous cleaning and Teddy's painstaking sharpening, where the saw whined and growled. A bandsaw has no friends, Evie, her father often teased her, holding up his left forefinger with only one knuckle. As a little girl, she would look away before he waved his maimed hand. Then it became a gruesome game they practiced together. Eva would giggle, then hide her thumb in her palm and wiggle her 4 fingers at him with a devilish squeal. Though she came to joke with Teddy and the others in his shop about his long ago misfortune, she never lost the dread of her father being injured again. Pop, she couldn't help herself. Papa, her voice alarmingly shrill. The women who'd been arranged in rows dispersed like chickadees at a clap of thunder. His ruddy face appeared suddenly popping up among the customers who faced him, and Eva laughed at his expression, so full of delight. But she wished she could reach her father's height and straighten his white paper cap, for its pinched front and back peaks were perched ridiculously askew on his giant head. Probably no one else noticed, and if they did, well, it was just the butcher's way. Teddy, look who's here. Mrs. Gerbing retrieved a white waxy package with one hand and change with the other from the smooth tray proffered toward her. College girl, to what do we owe the honor? The butcher winked at Mrs. Kist and nodded in his daughter's direction. We're lucky she still speaks to us. She knows so much. Eva averted her glance as the women chuckled and clucked, this time about her. In that moment, she thought how right she had been to make this trip alone. It was enough to face her father, to announce that she would marry Will. How much harder it would have been if Will himself had been with her as he wanted to be. And then she felt a wave of shame at wanting to shield the man she loved from the life she'd lived. Dad, stop, she said to the floor. Well, then what are you waiting for? Step back here. There's an apron on the hook. He looked at Eva with so much affection, so much approval. She felt as though he'd hugged her. I can use an extra pair of hands, he said proudly. Your mother, hell, the whole city is in a tizzy over the Polish Pope. There was nothing to do but pitch in. It wouldn't occur to her to insist her father interrupt his service to the customers of Teddy's provisions, even if she'd wanted to. Her news would have to wait. It felt good to work in the shop again, Eva thought, just like the old days before her father decided that the hours were wasted. The experience was holding her back. A girl doesn't learn anything working with her hands, he had declared on his daughter's 12th birthday. Teddy's wife, Mrs. Postregna, watched him toss a stained towel on the slate floor. Her eyes clouded. She thought of all the houses she had scrubbed clean, all the strangers' children she had tended those many nights while for 20 years the couple toiled by day in a trade she thought was noble. I won't have my girl carting carcasses like a common tradesman for one more day. No daughter of mine will break her back like you've had to. His voice was gruff and full of disdain. Eva deserves more. Mrs. Postregna pulled her daughter's coat from the rack that day, knowing better than to argue. She saw Evie look up at her with an expression so confused and worried, she hurried to fasten the frogs on the girl's navy coat and to smooth the velvet collar, hoping to reassure their little girl. But she wondered and wanted to ask what was shameful in providing food for friends and neighbors and helping them take care of their families. That day was the end of Eva's connection to her parents' life at work. Mr. and Mrs. Postregna rarely spoke with the shop over their black coffee at breakfast or over their dumplings at dinner. And Eva had piano lessons on Mondays, skating on Tuesdays, and practice in between to fill the time she'd have been at the shop after school, voice lessons on Saturday morning, gymnastics at Sokol Hall during every other free moment. Sometimes, swinging between the parallel bars, she wondered if rabbits were being delivered, nestled like sleeping babies on the pallets Hugo pushed into the back room, or if he was carrying bleating lambs over his shoulder to the cellar, their eyes glassy. For though she liked winning ribbons in for her gym skills, she had often missed what was going on in the shop without her. Now, after so much time, she was back working with her father. Eva pulled the apron over her head, feeling the exhilaration of old habits. She only wished that the cardinal hadn't called, that her mother was scurrying around with trays of her sausages here instead of in her home kitchen. But the honor of the request for the Pope to lunch on her mother's lauded recipes made from her father's butchering, why, it was a thrill for her parents. Besides, if her mother was not preoccupied, she wouldn't have had this chance to work at the shop in her place. Teddy handed Eva 2 heavy veal shanks, each bigger than his arm, for wrapping. She leaned against the metal sink to brace herself as she reached to the familiar places for the roll of paper, the spool of cotton string fixed on its dowel, the flat wax pencil tied above her head, hanging by 2 lengths of twine. As so many times in the past, Hugo appeared just in time to cut the string, blushing and turning away as she tried to thank him. Nothing seemed to have changed. There was a lull in orders. Teddy stole a glance at Eva, helping a customer. This girl, his daughter, a woman, in love with that young man, Will Dixon. That Will, he looked so much like his name, lanky, strapping, American. The butcher shook his head and was glad when the counterbell demanded his attention again. The stream of business continued until the Angelus bells rang out from St. Simeon's, signaling the end of the workday. Mr. Postregna appeared from behind the swinging door in his insulated lumberjack shirt, hatless and carrying his domed lunch pail. Eva was surprised to see new patches of silver at the edges of her father's thick, wavy hair, to notice his jet black hair change in such a short time. Why, this was just the beginning, it struck her, of other changes in her parents, in herself, that they would not share together. Now we talk, Teddy said, unable to resist the urge to cover his daughter's head with his rough hand, to smooth her neatly parted hair. Their child, this godsend, he did not know how to let her go, to send her on her way. It had been enough to see her off to college. This was different, so much bigger. What's on your noggin? He steered her head toward the door and onto the avenue. Feeling his touch that way, it sent her back to her childhood. As her father fixed the shop bolt, Eva pulled away, annoyed. She wanted to tell him the news face to face, like equals. She reminded herself she wasn't here for some old-fashioned blessing. She was here to start her own life, prepared to fight her father for it, expecting his demands, his conditions, levied for any change she ever wanted to make in her life. Her mother called these Teddy's provisions, just like the shop. If you want this, you must do that. Papa, she started, her voice breaking a little. Dad, she corrected herself. Will Dixon is leaving for California. The mad scientist is now a wandering minstrel? Teddy's dark eyes began to dance, and I should care why? He'll be going to graduate school. Teddy Postrenga smacked his lips. I could sure use a tall lager about now, Evie. I have a thirst you could photograph. Dad, listen. Eva tugged on the handle of her father's pail. Will's leaving in 2 weeks. Jesus, I hear you, as does the whole neighborhood. Teddy patted his daughter's mitten. So he'll be a big man, this Will Dixon? Oh, Dad, that's not what I'm talking about. She wanted to stamp her foot. She felt frustrated. The combination of her father's teasing and the fact that she could soon be a married woman scared her. So much was uncertain. She wanted to finish school, knew her father expected it. He would disapprove, of that much she could be certain. She would have to fight him for the very thing that frightened her. 2,000 miles away. That's a long way for sure, he said, tucking his upper lip and shaking his head from side to side. A long, long way. Why, it took me a week to get to Frisco before I was shipped out to the Pacific. Eva thought of Will and a life apart from her, then thought of joining him so far from every other thing she loved. Both ideas choked her. I don't know what to do, Papa. Her own words stunned her, sounding like a plea instead of the intended proclamation of her destiny. She looked at the ground and let out a deep sigh. Well, what should we make for your mother's dinner? Teddy looked across Damon Avenue as though he didn't hear his daughter. She'll have had no time to cook, what with a cardinal and his sausage frenzy. That Pope's good fortune is my misfortune. The lucky old Polak to be on the receiving end of her recipe. He slapped his thigh, enjoying his own irreverence. Stuffed cabbage, what do you think? We'll make it in the basement kitchen. Escape the biddies upstairs slaving with your mother. You're not getting this, Dad, Eva blurted. Will wants to marry me. So I've been told. Teddy looked east, inhaling the soft breezes. You know already? Even if this Will isn't one of ours, I can tell he's been raised a good boy. He called last night. Teddy raised his chin, strained for his old authority before measuring his word, called to ask for a father's permission. Teddy turned to his daughter. She stood in the twilight, studying him with the crystal blue eyes of her mother. You've known all day and you said nothing? Eva's expression was fierce and defiant. Teddy thought to reprimand her for disrespect. Then he saw her striped muffler, the one his wife had knitted, dragging in the snow, and she seemed so like their little Evie. He wanted to tuck her under his arm like the old days and race for their flat. Instead, he laid his bare hand across his barrel chest. Enough of this cat and mouse, Eva. I just have one question. He looked at his daughter solemnly. Is this what you want? He asked gently. Marriage to this Will Dixon? Eva stared at her father, amazed at the question between them. Always before it had been what he wanted, what he proclaimed was best. She held her breath, thinking how to answer him about what it was she wanted. Well, she wanted Will, that much she knew. Married in California? These were different matters. Yes, Papa, she finally whispered. She scarcely breathed, feeling the fear of flinging herself into unknown space, but feeling too a kind of exhilaration she had never experienced. So you go to your young man. You have plans to make. 2 weeks is almost no time. Your mama and I will take care of the Pope. Thank you, Jason. Thanks to the Academy for honoring Barb with this amazing story, and please look for more when it's available.
Thanks, Mari. Yes, we'll find out what happens to Eva and Will in the next issue of the magazine, Wisconsin People and Ideas, and it comes out in February of 2021, and we'll have the rest of the story, the entire story, in the magazine then. Thanks again, Mari, for reading for Barbara. I appreciate it. Our next reader is Jennifer Morales, who won second place in this year's fiction contest with her story, and I love the title of this, Wiseacres. Jennifer is a poet, fiction writer, and performance artist based in the Driftless area. She's also president of the board of the Driftless Writing Center in Viroqua. If you get a chance, check out the Writing Center. They do a lot of great programming for the Driftless, but also beyond. It's a good program. Her short story collection called Meet Me Halfway, Milwaukee Stories, was a Wisconsin Center for the Books 2016 Book of the Year. And recent publications of hers include Cousins, a short story in Milwaukee Noir, and The Boy Without a Bike in Cutting Edge, New Stories of Mystery and Crime by Women Writers, edited by Joyce Carol Oates. I'm pleased to welcome for the reading tonight our second place winner of the 2020 contest, Jennifer Morales.
Hey, thank you, Jason. And thanks to the Wisconsin Academy for honoring this story in this way. I won't get through the whole story, but my story will also appear in the February issue of Wisconsin People and Ideas, so I hope you'll look for that. This is called Wiseacres. The woman stands in a yellow sundress and sandals, snow circling her blue ankles. It's January in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and she's out on the street half naked. She's not one of the beggars that Dan's father, Buck, had told him to expect. She's not asking for money. Put a little bit of change in your front pocket, Buck had said as Dan was leaving home. You got 3 days in town for the expo. Shake a little loose every day, but no more than a couple, like $5 total. Got it? In Buck's eyes, he saw doubt. $1 or $2 a day, no more. Don't be soft, Danny. Dan's whole miserable job at the Building Trades Expo was handing out little keychains promoting their family business, Johansson Ladder Incorporated, and answering questions about bulk order discounts. He couldn't understand how his dad always came home from the expo all fired up. The chaos and noise of the vendor hall wiped Dan out and emptied his head of sense. Each morning he left the convention center for a smoke and gave up a $5 to the first raggedy man who looked like he really needed it. But the woman in the sundress isn't asking for money. She doesn't shiver or give any other sign of being cold as she goes through her routine. Wait for someone to approach, lean in to say something to them. Wait, give, or don't give a flower from the battered 5-gallon spackle bucket that hangs from her wrist. It's a Wednesday, the middle day of the expo. Dan's standing there smoking, trying to guess whether the next person will get a flower. He gets it wrong 3 times in a row. The first guy got a flower and Dan totally figured he wouldn't. Then the old lady comes up and Dan thinks she's definitely getting a flower, but she doesn't, and so on. Dan gives up and turns to watch the buses go hissing through the slush on Wisconsin Avenue. He knows she's got to be nuts, but eventually his curiosity gets the better of him. He grinds out his butt and strides over there, hitching up his new jeans as he goes. She looks to be in her early 20s, young as his little sister. Her short hair is the color of coffee and it gleams, concentrating the weak rays of the winter sun. Cold enough for you? Dan says, though he knows the question is stupid. Her bare white arms are speckled with goose flesh. She studies him with eyes the color of corn in early June. Of course it's cold, but tell me this, what brings you joy? Her face is steady, seamless, giving no signal to him that this is some kind of joke. Her eyes have more depth to them than Dan would have guessed. Up close, the pale green goes mossy. Her insistent gaze reminds him of the look his 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Halverson, always gave him, one that said, I bet you can figure this out on your own. Back then, he just wanted Mrs. Halverson to tell him the right answer. She knew it already, so what was the point of risking being wrong? I said, what brings you joy? The woman is holding a purple carnation just out beyond Dan's reach. His hand twitches in his pocket and he imagines himself grabbing the flower. He doesn't understand what she is asking him. He's heard of these people, street artists. There aren't any of them back home. Joy, Dan hears himself say, puzzled, his teeth catching on the J as if he only recently learned English. He shakes his head, rousing himself out of her spell. What's joy? Her hand lowers, dropping the purple flower back into the bucket. She looks away toward the next supplicant, a weather-beaten man in a ripped jacket. I'll tell you all about joy, sweetheart, the man says. I can tell you some stories for damn sure. Dan goes back inside. He hands out ladder keychains. He answers questions about volume discounts, about small business certification for municipal procurement. Later that night, he goes out for dinner at the 5 o'clock steakhouse with a sealants vendor and a guy from the Carpenters Union. He tries out 3 different kinds of whiskey. Wiseacres. Dan's father warned him he'd meet a lot of them in the city. These hoity-toity types who think they know everything, who think they're funny about it too, think they're getting one over on you. That woman must think she's funny, out in the slush asking people about joy. Does she think she's some kind of expert? He looks for her the next day. Every smoke break, 6 of them, he strides the circumference of the convention center, 2 city blocks squared. His calves ache from the walking, the wet cold stiffening his jeans, but she's not there. He tried asking people back home. At the Legion, catching the Packers game with his friend Tom, Dan asked him, "What brings you joy, man?" His throat caught on the question. It had taken him until halftime to get up the nerve. Tom tipped his shaggy head back to pour in the last of the basket of pretzels. "It would give me some goddamn joy if they put Aaron Rodgers back in right now. If they had kept their defense up, he wouldn't even be out with his goddamn collarbone broken half." Dan looked at the screen across the bar, one of 8 in the small room, all tuned to the game. The Pack was down by 11. Would seeing Rodgers run out on the field right now really bring Tom joy? No, joy, man. Tom looked at him out of the corner of his eye and then back to the screen. He hunched his shoulders. "What's that?" Dan couldn't say. On the way home, he hit Walmart to look it up in a dictionary. The emotion of great delight or happiness caused by something exceptionally good or satisfying, keen pleasure, elation. Just to be sure, he looked up keen, finely sharpened as an edge, so shaped as to cut or pierce substances readily, and elation, a feeling of or state of great joy or pride, exultant gladness, high spirits. High spirits or pleasure sharp as a knife edge? When was the last time Dan felt that? Or the first? Where did Dan have room for that in the trailer he shared with his dad? They had a real house once, before his mom got sick, a sturdy old brick one with the original oak woodwork and a stained glass window in the front. On a sunny day, it felt like living in a church. As a kid, Dan liked to lie in the plains of color, washing his hands in blue, orange, red. If he lay there long enough, the colors would travel the length of his body, a kaleidoscope transforming him a hair, an inch of denim at a time. When his mom got diagnosed, his dad struggled mightily to keep them all in health insurance, but the insurance company came up with some excuse to jack up the company's coverage, and they all lost it. Mom, Dad, Dan, his sister away at college, the 5 hired guys in the shop. They just didn't want to pay for her care. Buck emptied their savings and Dan took a second job. Even with all that, they had to sell the house and downsize to the trailer. Dan knew that was what finally killed her, knowing she was leaving them both broke and exhausted, and at the end, alone together in that cramped and humbling space. He saw it in her eyes. Not that Dan thought he was better than anybody else here, although their trailer was the nicest one in the park. Buck wanted his wife to have some comforts, some beauties still. He had some Amish build a wraparound porch and hung a glider swing to look out on the valley. At the foot of the porch, he planted a fat row of pink roses. "Dad, do you ever think about joy?" Dan asked a couple weeks after the expo. He dreamed the night before of the green-eyed woman, her flowers. "Your mother? Of course, you idiot. I was married to her for 30 years. What do you think?" In all his musing on the word, it never clicked that Joy was his mom's name. Joy Ellen Johansson, born Joy Ellen Wilder. Of course, Dan always called her Mom. Right. Besides that, though, I mean, the feeling joy. "Damned if I know," Buck said. "She used to try to tell me that in low times I should look to her, that she would always be my joy." He shifted in his recliner, lifting up one buttock as if it hurt. It must hurt, Dan thought, him sitting there all day recovering from his heart attack while he knew things were going to shit at the shop. His mom had held their lives together at home and work, with threads invisible as a spider web. She was the connector. Dan recalled the mysterious trace of her hands as she taught him to tie his shoes, his eyes straining to capture each movement so that he could replay them in his head and emerge one day from his room, triumphant, his shoes tied. "And your joy since Mom passed away?" Buck grimaced like Dan had released a bad smell into the room. After a minute, he waved his son away. "Forget about that." From the shop office, Dan watched the guys working the line, gluing yellow plastic caps on the feet of Johansson's cheapest model. Under their heavy filter masks, the ones that left red lines on their sweaty faces when they pulled them off at lunch, did any of them feel the sharp knife edge of joy? Sure, they joked around with each other in the break room. Dan used to be part of those jokes, but it was never anything deep. Now he couldn't even remember what was so funny. Without his dad in the office, Dan had more to do but less attention for any of it. Lori, the admin, had to remind him before she left at 4:15 each day of something he forgot, some OSHA report, some paperwork Buck would need for the audit come spring. The rough paneled walls made the narrow rectangular room feel smaller than it was. There remained an empty desk where Joy used to sit and smoke and type up the reports on the computer. The place still smelled like her Virginia Slims. Nobody was allowed to smoke in the office anymore. He knew his dad expected him to take over the business when he retired, still a good 10 or 15 years off, Dan hoped. And he knew he should be grateful for it, but these weeks in charge while Buck recuperated left him agitated. Maybe he didn't want his dad's life, his business. Sometimes, after Lori and everyone had left, he felt like setting the place on fire. Dan made up a reason to go back to the city every couple of months after the expo. His buddy won tickets from Rock 97.5 to a concert at the Riverside. He was going to a Brewers game with a high school friend who was working in Milwaukee now. There was a blowout sale at a sporting goods store in the burbs, and he was in the market for a new hunting rifle. He enjoyed the challenge of coming up with new and semi-plausible excuses. Sometimes he would actually do the things he said he was going to do, go to the game, buy the rifle. And it seemed like maybe he was becoming someone else in those transactions, someone more interesting. His girlfriend, Mickey, got suspicious of his sudden interest in visiting the city. Why are you going there so much? And why can't I ever come along? You got another girl? To calm her, he took Mickey with him once. They toured the Harley-Davidson Museum, played blackjack at Potawatomi, and strolled along the lake. She watched him, watch the streets. Who are you looking for? Mickey asked, exasperation in her blue eyes. They were drinking bloodies and eating overpriced eggs at some industrial place in the 3rd Ward that the guy at the desk of their hotel said was good. In fact, the portions were small and everything was covered with cilantro. Nobody in particular, just people watching, I guess. That's what you do when you come to a place like this, right? I guess. She paused in salting her eggs to study him. You've just been, I don't know, distracted a lot lately. Do you ever feel joy, Mick? It was coming on the anniversary of the day they met 3 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday cookout. Soon after that, Dan's mom got sick. Mickey had stood by him through her illness and death. He was thankful for that kindness, but had they shared any moments that counted as joy? He couldn't say. You're getting weird. She flicked a piece of cilantro onto the edge of her plate, then swabbed it off with her napkin. And I don't like weird. I'm serious. He tried to laugh off her irritation. Come on, Mick, just answer. When was the last time you felt joy? Joy? You mean like happiness? It's different than that. Happiness is like a long-term thing. Joy is, he tried to think of an example she might relate to. Like when you're a kid and you and your friends rake together this huge pile of leaves and you jump into it, that feeling. I never liked that feeling. The leaves get down your shirt and there's ants and spiders and no. She shuddered and scratched her back as if something was crawling there. Well, something else then, I don't know, sledding? That feeling when you go over the edge of the hill and you can't stop and it's like you're flying? Doesn't anything grown-ups do count as joy? Grown-ups sled, he shrugged. Maybe we should get a toboggan this winter or some tubes. Maybe we should get married. People always look happy on their wedding day. She squeezed his hand, but the smirk on her face confirmed that the suggestion was sarcastic. Her sarcasm wounded him. The thought of proposing had crossed his mind once or twice. He loved her, loved the way she made him feel, desired, useful, steady, but it never seemed like the right moment. Now he wondered if his hesitation was rooted in something deeper than that. I'm not talking about happy, Mick. Joyful. Joy isn't happiness. He thought back to the dictionary definition. It's sharp, quick, something so good it cuts you open. I don't want to be cut open. She tossed her napkin on the table and crossed her arms over her chest. You know, I don't understand anything that's going on right now. I'll stop there. Thanks for listening, everybody. And thanks for having me, Jason, and the Academy.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing your story. As Jennifer mentioned, you can catch the rest of that story in the next edition of Wisconsin People and Ideas, which is coming out in February. We're so pleased to have Jennifer reading with us tonight. We're now moving on to our last reader of the evening, our first place contest winner, who's also coming to us from the Driftless area. I'm pleased to have with us tonight Jacqueline Thomas, and Jacqueline's going to read from her award-winning story, Junk Shed. Now, this is a story our fiction contest judge, Chloe Benjamin, said in her comments about the story, which we published with the story in the magazine, that Junk Shed is a story in which gender roles, sex, and power are masterfully rendered through the daily interactions and violence of the natural world, all in stylish and visceral prose. Now, this is a story about a junk shed, so you can imagine the amount of distillation and condensation that has gone into this story, and it's really great. So I'm glad that Jacqueline can share it with us tonight. Jacqueline's is the author of this fine story. Jacqueline lived in Madison for more than 30 years in a housing project where she served as director of an on-site community learning center before moving to Dodgeville, where she lives now. Her nonfiction work has been published by Proximity Magazine and is forthcoming in the spring issue of Fourth Genre as a runner-up in the Michael Steinberg Memorial Essay Contest. I'm pleased to have with us tonight the winner of the 2020 Wisconsin People and Ideas Fiction Contest, Jacqueline Thomas.
I'm new to this. Let's see if I can figure this out. So, Junk Shed. My father eats Braunschweiger sandwiches, thick ones he squeezes tight to hold together, using the hand that's missing a finger. Bread fills in the empty space. It bulges out like a roll of fat. His good hand is taking a nap, a boulder that doesn't move beside his plate. Only cousins ever ask about that finger. He makes them guess. Bobcat? Wolf? Vampire bat? Then he says my name and laughs. She eats everything. Nobody ever calls him a liar. Mom comes to the table with a cup of coffee, smoothing lotion into her arms, swooping it over her shoulders and up her long neck. She's June pink from the garden, but will be nut brown by July. Best change out of those school clothes, she says. A warm patch of happiness swells in my belly. I push it to my toes and swing my feet beneath the table. My dress is for every day now, I remind her, because this day was a half day and the last day of school. Got work to do, he says. Don't nobody want to be seeing your underpants. I don't have to look at him to know how his tongue is working through a clay-colored mess. Junk shed, Mom says, hands tangling like two squirming kittens, spreaders waiting, couple of scour calves in it. She lifts her cup. There's a creamy clot of lotion between the wing bones of her throat. Jergens, Folgers, Silver Spring horseradish. The kitchen is churning with smells. Zippo, Pall Mall. Get a move on, he says, scraping back his chair. Don't got all day. I take my own sweet time and drink slowly, never lifting my eyes from the milk in my glass until the screen door slams behind him. I wipe my mouth and look. The smoke he left behind curdles in the noonday sun. That finger was bitten by a barn door long before I was born. It got the gangrene and then it was gone. Mom told me. I never ask him a thing, not if I can help it. Junk shed, Mom says, rapping the table to get my attention. She swallows the last of her coffee while standing at the sink, and follows my father outside. Once a year, we empty the junk shed and start over. It's nothing like a holiday, which is what the first day of summer vacation should be. It's a little bit like clearing out a school desk, but that was easy. Scuffed box of crayons, warped ruler, chewed up pencils, baby scissors, nothing I want for 5th grade. In the junk shed are things we can't burn. Heaps of tin cans, piles of busted jars and broken bottles. After I shovel them in, the manure spreader will spit them out into a sinkhole by the barbed wire fence. The gym shorts I brought home are musty. I pull them on anyway under my dress and step into last year's loafers. There's a bucket on the counter for table scraps. I slap its lid tight. I'll do my chores, I tell the creaky screen door in the order I want to. Only a few sugar maples shade the hen yard. The chicken coop is dark and dusty. When the last blinking biddy flusters past, I slop table scraps out behind them. There they are, sure enough, maggots. The rooster gets to them first, planting his reptilian feet in a pile of brothers and sisters. I know a lot about maggots because I know a lot about flies. I like watching chickens eat, beaks popping down and right back up, the way they nibble and consider things, discuss stuff. Chickens have good manners. I suppose it's the rooster who trains them, but I don't like how he does it, singling one out to blindside with trouble. Maybe her friends take a few jittery sidesteps, but they mind their own business and keep on pecking. It would be impolite to stare. They pretend not to notice his beak at her neck, his great thorny feet digging into her back, her breast pressed into the ground. They won't look up until he hops off, shaking his tail feathers like, guess I showed her. Then they watch only him, strutting his stuff, puffing up, wobbling his ugly red waddle. I have a rock in the nest of my lap. If that rooster is of a mind to teach someone, anyone, something or anything today, I'll knock him senseless. This is the Helm of the hilltop we live on. Beneath it, a steep road and chilly creek run like 2 skinny legs into the bottomlands. There, Pigeon Lane tiptoes slow and shady past tall rock faces guarding our woods before breaking out in a straight sunny sprint to the mailbox. I won't go any further than that all summer, standing on a gummy lip of blacktop at the end of our dusty road, prying open a zinc mailbox. None of the letters will be for me. I know this. What I don't know is who I'll be when the school bus carries me away from there again. The giddiness of summer isn't 3 months without school. It's the excitement of surprise you might be to yourself when you return. A barn door rumbles behind me. I jump up. Stepping from that dark mouth is my father, swinging my bucket to prove I'm doing something, even if it isn't the something I'm supposed to be doing. I head out and up. He doesn't notice. There's a heifer tied up in the barnyard, haltered to a fence. He checks to see that the knots are tight before moseying on down to her other end. Then he stands there, holding her tail, doing nothing, only taking a good long look. Me too, standing in the shadow of our house beside the junk shed, tractor, manure spreader. None of my cousins have a junk shed, though most of them live on farms. It's nothing to talk about what families do with trash, but we do get around to every outbuilding eventually, and I've never seen another junk shed. People who live in town must talk about it. Their garbage is somebody's business, and they owe it to everybody to have it to the street on time. I rinsed the scrap bucket out with the garden hose coiled behind a bush. I think our back porch was somebody's front porch long ago. 3 slender poles rise like spindles and blossom into lacy fans. People probably came by here once in buggies to sit and visit on this porch back in olden times before the yard fell off. 10 paces out, an iron curlicue gate opens onto nothing. Long grasses tumble through its fence, hanging like shaggy bangs over a salt lick. The other end of that fence almost connects to the junk shed, but doesn't quite. Instead, it sags into itself and curls away, making room for crumbling steps that end in a boot-sucking river of cow shit and clay. Tractors are stronger than cars, which is why our front porch is a cobbled-on back porch with a freezer and woodpile inside. I wrap a post in the crook of my arm. It's smooth and warm. Leaning out, I threaten to drop myself, letting the belly of my arm slide until my hand snatches me up short. Wasps, so skinny I can't see their waists, are building a nest overhead. It looks like an empty corn cob becoming an empty sunflower. My fingers begin to give. At the very last second, I jerk myself back and hold on. I am both the hero and the happy damsel on the stage of this narrow porch, taking a bow, kissing my own hand. A barn cat passes by but doesn't look. If I could rescue anyone, it would be Mom. We'd go to town. She'd have a butter yellow kitchen with breezy curtains, fat tulips on the table, and a window so close to the neighbor lady's house, they could lean out to chat or pass a sugary pie. Out back would be a stoop for snapping peas and a come-along laundry line for pulling in fresh sheets and sending out dish towels. Up front, there'd be a wide columned porch with brisk flag, a whistling mailman climbing its steps beside the garden just for flowers, and a silver trash can. I wish I'd been born to live in town. That's what I'm thinking. Posed like a jewelry box ballerina, barefoot against one knee and arms sweeping up overhead, until I remember wasps, the live wires of their legs too close to my hand. I learned about me by reading a piece of junk mail, Life Science Library, limited time offer, Time Life books. A cartoon kid had a question. What does a baby do for the 9 months it lives inside its mother? I'd never thought of it before. The time between my birthday in June and their wedding in December. Here is a trick I know. A bucket half full of water is also half full of air. If I stand in the middle of our half yard, swinging my arm like a windmill, the air makes the water stay inside. It can go on like this forever, so long as my arm keeps up, and not a drop will splash on my head. Now I'm wondering how it will work if I swing the bucket sideways and I'm the one spinning. My ears are full of wind and blood pumping, but I catch the tail end of a whistle and my name barked out. I stop short. The water sloshes. It's only Mom, bringing Rodney to the barnyard for water. I wave so she knows I heard her and to show her I'm walking drunk, but I know what I'm supposed to be doing and headed for the junk shed. The world is nearly steady, my ears almost empty of sound, when a grinding gear shifts. Something heavy is clearing its throat to make the climb up our hill. Down along the bottomlands, a dust plume evaporates and flashes of silver wink between the trees. Sweeping the grass, I find my missing shoe and head up before my foot is firmly in it. Beyond the junk shed, past the garden, in between new carrots and nettles. Frank the milkman is fat. He wears white coveralls that never get dirty and black rubber boots that shine like church shoes. The cab of his truck is 2 stories tall. He fills up its wide window. School out already? Frank doesn't have any kids. Summer comes to him by surprise. He's patting his top pockets, looking for a pen, when it's already right there in his hand on the clipboard he uses for measurements. I lean against the scratchy wall of the milk house, picking lime scales from the rough boards with my fingernails, waiting for him to climb down. He's considering a tiny pair of brown bottles, twisting them this way and that before writing their numbers down. His hands are plump as dinner rolls and dimpled like a baby's. There's a hole in the milk house behind me with a door like an upside down mailbox. I find it with my fingers while Frank feels around for his cap. This is where the hose of his milk truck snakes in to connect to the spigot of the bulk tank. I spring the latch and wait. Frank has to lean out of his own way to dig beneath his stomach for a side pocket. He drags out a tangled wad and sits high above me, sorting it. Frank has a lot of curly black hair, too much for a hairnet. Shower caps, paper hats from the veterinarian, even ladies' rain bonnets from the dime store don't work. For a while, he wore a pink bathing cap, but his head broke out in a heat rash. Frank is a very sweaty man with a face that glistens like cheese. He keeps handkerchiefs in both back pockets to mop his forehead and to sponge beneath his chins. It was his mother who suggested the wig caps. He lives with her and she has a dresser drawer full. He pulls one on now, so low that it squishes his face shut. You ready to pull off this caper? I laugh because I like him and because I'm ready. After you, I say, lifting the milk hose door. He gives me a snort and plucks at the top of his head so that his face falls out full fold. Frank comes down from the milk truck backwards. Step by step, his feet find one another. His hand on the hoist bar comes squeaking along. He takes his time, the truck bouncing on its springs. There's a ladder up the side of the long silver tank with a submarine hatch above it. I watch it in case any milk sloshes out. Go ahead, sweet pea, I left it on for you. There's a radio in the barn, but not in our house, and I'm not allowed in the barn or the milk house, though I've watched Frank through its grimy window enough times to know what he does in there, and he knows what I do in here. I make myself comfortable, then scoot up and roll the dial. I don't really much care what I'm listening to, but I change the stations a lot. It's the sinking back into Frank's seat that feels good, like a bubble bath, if a bubble bath could smell like aftershave. There's only one seat in the milk truck. It's for the driver. Where the other one should be sits a cooler full of butter and cheese. If we take some, Frank takes its price out of the milk check. Once he's on the ground, Frank is sure-footed and quick. He lifts the heavy hose, threading its silver nose into the milk house, and steps inside at the side door to tug it through. He picks cover all out of his behind when he thinks I can't see him. My father doesn't want me in the milk house or barn because he doesn't want me anyplace and never wanted me at all. That's what I learned from Time Life books without ever reading one. Girls belong in the house, he says. That's his excuse. Doesn't he know mom's a girl? Sometimes I wonder, she says. And I'll stop there for time, but the real action of the story is on its way. So thank you very much for letting me read.
I did not want that to end. Such a great story and such a great job reading. Thanks, Jacqueline. You can catch the rest of that story on our website, wisconsinacademy.org/magazine. It's in the current issue of Wisconsin People and Ideas magazine. All the poems that you've heard tonight, you can catch them there too. And we'll have the second and third place stories coming up in the next issue of the magazine. And for all you writers out there listening today who are from Wisconsin, please keep in mind that our 2021 contests, fiction and poetry, both open up on January 15th. You can learn about the contest at wisconsinacademy.org/contests. Again, my thanks to our readers this evening who were so great. Some of the best Wisconsin writers that we have, and we're so happy to have them with us tonight. I'd also like to thank our host, the Wisconsin Book Festival, for doing such a wonderful job and providing a seamless festival, even in the face of the pandemic and moving to Zoom. They're doing a great job, and they deserve your support. And I appreciate you coming tonight. Thanks for participating. Catch the rest of the book festival if you can. Again, I'm Jason A. Smith for the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters, saying good night and have a good Halloween. Thanks. Bye.